I was standing inches away from my best friend on the happiest day of her life when I realized she was watching me get assaulted, and she didn't do a single thing to stop it. How do you look at someone you've known for a decade, someone you've shared every secret and every tear with, and realize that your safety, your dignity, and your body mean less to them than the aesthetic of their wedding day? People always tell you that weddings bring out the best and worst in people, but I never expected it to reveal a darkness in my best friend that I don't think I can ever unsee. But the worst part? The part that keeps me up at night, replaying the scene over and over like a broken film reel? It wasn't just the hands on my body. It was the silence that followed. It was the way the music kept playing, the way the champagne kept flowing, and the way the person I trusted most in the world decided that my trauma was just an inconvenience to her party. To understand how we got to that moment on that stage, you have to understand who we were. I'm 31 now, and my best friend, let's call her Sarah, is 28. We were that duo. You know the ones. The friends who have a shorthand language, who can communicate an entire conversation with just a look across a crowded room. When she asked me to be her maid of honor, it wasn't even a question. It was an honor. My husband, who has been my rock for the 7 years we've been married, was the best man. It felt perfect. It felt like the culmination of our lives intertwining. We were a team. The wedding was one of those rustic DIY farm weddings that look incredible on Pinterest, but are an absolute nightmare to coordinate. We were out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by golden fields and weathered wood. There were about 70 guests, which sounds small, but when you're the one running the show behind the scenes, it feels like 1,000. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Just the legalities, a heartfelt kiss, and the promise of a legendary party to follow. Sarah didn't want a stiff, formal affair. She wanted a celebration, and as her maid of honor, I was determined to give her exactly that, even if it meant I didn't sit down for 4 hours straight. The reception started with a bit of chaos. If you've ever been in a wedding party, you know the drill. There were hiccups with the grand entrances, the timing of the speeches was off, and the first dances felt a little rushed. But once the formal stuff was out of the way, I felt this massive wave of relief. My husband and I had just delivered our speeches, heartfelt, tear-jerking tributes to the couple, and we finally got to join them on the dance floor. That's always my favorite part of a wedding. There's this specific energy in the air, this vibration of love and possibility. Standing there, dancing with my husband, I felt so lucky. I looked at Sarah and her new husband, and I thought, we made it. The hard part is over. I couldn't have been more wrong. As the night shifted into that hazy, high-energy, informal phase, the cracks started to show. It started with Sarah's dress. It was this gorgeous, heavy gown with meters of delicate fabric, but the bustle, the little hook that holds the train up so you can dance, snapped. She was tripping over herself, looking frustrated, so the other bridesmaid and I whisked her up to the head table to fix it. The head table was positioned on a raised wooden stage, overlooking the entire dance floor. It felt like being in a fishbowl, but at the time, I was just focused on being the fixer. I got her settled in her chair and realized I needed my emergency kit and the comfier shoes I'd brought for her. I told her I'd be right back. I remember weaving through the crowd, feeling that buzz of a good party, grabbing the kit and rushing back up onto the stage. When I got back, the seating arrangement had changed. A guest named Alex was now sitting right between Sarah and the other bridesmaid. Alex is the groom's stepbrother. I'd met him briefly before, but he was one of those guys who always seemed to be on. Too loud, too close, too much. I didn't think much of it at first. I shook his hand, gave a polite smile, and excused myself to get back to work. While he sat there flirting heavily with the other bridesmaid, I knelt down at Sarah's feet. I was on the floor, surrounded by piles of white tulle and lace, trying to figure out how to pin this massive dress back together so she could go back to being the star of the show. I was focused. I was in maid of honor mode. Then, Alex decided he was done talking, He stood up to leave, but because of how the table and the stage were set up, his only exit path was directly through the space where I was kneeling. He looked down at me and said, "Excuse me, I'm going to try not to step on your wedding dress." I looked up, still holding a handful of pins, and realized he was right. The dress was everywhere. I leaned forward, practically lying on the floor, and shoved the fabric under Sarah's chair to clear a path for him. I was being helpful. I was being polite. I even started apologizing to him for being in the way. That's when the world shifted. Alex didn't just walk past. He tripped. Or at least, that's what he made it look like. He stumbled, his heavy boot kicking my leg hard, and I immediately started babbling more apologies. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" I was looking up from the floor, vulnerable and confused. But instead of getting up and moving on, Alex knelt down beside me. He didn't just kneel. He moved into my personal space with a predatory speed that made my blood run cold. He put his arm around my shoulder, but it wasn't a comforting gesture. He pulled me into his chest, hard, pinning my arm against him. He leaned in and whispered, "Oh, it's okay." My apology stopped instantly. My brain sent a signal to my throat that I didn't even authorize. The sorries turned into no's. "No," I said, my voice small. "No, please." I tried to lean away, but the stage was cramped. To my right was the heavy wooden table. Behind me was the edge of the stage, a sharp drop into a dark garden. In front of me was Sarah. I was trapped. And then he got bolder. Because I wasn't fighting back hard enough, because I was in shock, he tightened his grip. I felt his hand slide down my back, heavy and deliberate. He reached down and grabbed a handful of my backside, squeezing firmly. I felt my breath hitch. Before I could even process the violation of the touch, he dipped his head down onto my shoulder and pressed his lips against my skin, kissing me right there in front of everyone. I looked at Sarah. She was sitting right there. She wasn't 5 feet away. She was within arm's reach. Our eyes locked. I was looking at her with pure, unadulterated terror. I was screaming with my eyes. "Help me! Get him off me!" Sarah looked at Alex. She said his name. "Alex," she said, her voice stern like she was scolding a dog that had jumped on the sofa. But she didn't move. She didn't reach out to pull him away. She didn't stand up. She just sat there, watching. I saw her eyes flick up toward the dance floor, scanning the room for a split second, and then they flicked back to Alex. "Alex," she said again, a little louder this time, but still with that weird, controlled tone. I felt like I was drowning in plain sight. I was being groped and kissed by a stranger on a stage in front of 70 people, and my best friend was treating it like a minor social faux pas. The music was still thumping in my ears, a remix of some upbeat pop song that felt sickeningly cheerful compared to the violation happening to my body. Then I heard a different voice, a voice that sounded like thunder breaking through a fog. "Get." It was one word, short, sharp, deadly. I didn't even have to turn around to know it was my husband. The moment my husband's voice cut through the air, the physical pressure of Alex's grip vanished. It was like a spell had been broken, but the air left behind was cold and sharp. Alex scrambled to his feet, his face flushing a deep, mottled red that wasn't just from the alcohol. He looked like a cornered animal, shifting his weight from side to side, trying to find a way to laugh it off. "Oh man, I accidentally kicked your wife," Alex stammered, his voice thin and shaky. "I was just trying to help her up. I'm sorry, I better sort it out." He was lying through his teeth, and everyone on that stage knew it. He hadn't been helping me up. He had been pinning me down. He had been tasting the skin on my shoulder while his hand was firmly planted on my body. My husband didn't move an inch. He stood there, jaw set so tight I thought his teeth might crack. His eyes fixed on Alex with a level of intensity that would have made a braver man run for cover. "I've got it from here," my husband said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced the immediate area. It was the voice of a man who was moments away from losing his composure, but was holding on to it by a single, fraying thread for the sake of the wedding. Alex didn't wait for a second invitation to leave. He scurried off the stage, his head ducked, with the other bridesmaid trailing a few steps behind him like a confused shadow. I watched them disappear into the crowd of dancing bodies, and for a second, the world felt like it was tilting on its axis. I was still on the floor, my knees pressed into the hard wood of the stage, my hands trembling so violently I had to tuck them into the folds of Sarah's white dress just to hide them. I looked up at Sarah. This was the moment. This was the part where my best friend, the woman whose hand I'd held through breakups, through career crises, through every major milestone of her life, would lean down, grab my hands, and ask me if I was okay. I expected her to be furious on my behalf. I expected her to call for security, or at least tell her new husband what his stepbrother had just done. Instead, Sarah looked away. She didn't reach out. She didn't offer a hand. She just sat there, adjusted her bodice, and looked out at the dance floor as if she were admiring the flower arrangements. The silence from her was louder than any of the music pumping through the speakers. It was a cold, calculated silence. It was the sound of someone deciding that their perfect day was more important than their friend's safety. My husband reached down and gripped my elbows, gently hoisting me to my feet. He didn't know about the kiss yet. From where he'd been standing, he'd seen the grab, he'd seen the aggressive hug, but he hadn't seen the violation of the kiss. I could see the fire in his eyes, the protective instinct vibrating off him in waves. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his hands lingering on my arms as if to anchor me. I nodded, though it was a lie. My skin felt like it was crawling. Every nerve ending was screaming at me to run, to find a shower and scrub until I couldn't feel the phantom pressure of Alex's hand. But I looked at the 70 guests. I looked at the DIY decorations we'd spent weeks putting together, and I felt this sickening sense of duty. I was the maid of honor. I couldn't cause a scene. I couldn't be the reason the best night ever turned into a police report. "I'm fine," I managed to choke out. "Just shaken. Let's just get off the stage." We walked back to our table, where a few of our close friends were sitting. They had seen parts of it. From the floor level, they'd seen Alex hovering over me, seen the way he'd grabbed me. One of them leaned in, eyes wide with concern. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. "Is that guy insane? He totally just grabbed your ass in front of everyone." I didn't tell them about the kiss. Not then. I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud. If I said it, it became real. If I said it, then the wedding was officially ruined. I just nodded and took a long, shaky sip of my drink, trying to drown the taste of bile in the back of my throat. I watched my husband walk over to the groom, his best friend. I saw them huddled in the corner near the bar. My husband was talking low, his gestures sharp and urgent. I saw the groom's face fall, a look of genuine embarrassment and frustration crossing his features. He looked over at Alex, who was already back at the bar, ordering another drink as if nothing had happened. The groom went over to the bartender. I found out later that he told him to cut Alex off, that he'd had too much and was causing trouble. It felt like a win, a small piece of justice in a night that was rapidly spiraling out of control. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized it was a hollow victory. Alex didn't leave. He didn't apologize. In fact, 10 minutes later, I saw him standing at the bar with a fresh beer in his hand. The cut-off hadn't stuck, or he'd found someone else to buy it for him. He was still there, a shark circling the perimeter of the room. The rest of the night was a blur of forced smiles and tactical movements. Every time I saw Alex's head in the crowd, I moved to the opposite side of the room. I stayed close to my husband, using him as a physical shield. My nervous system was on high alert, every accidental brush from a passing guest making me jump like I'd been electric shocked. And through it all, I kept waiting for Sarah. I kept waiting for her to find me during a slow song. I kept waiting for her to catch my eye and mouth the words, "I'm sorry." I kept waiting for her to come over while I was at the bathroom sink and ask me what really happened on that stage. But she didn't. She danced. She laughed. She took photos with her relatives. She leaned into her new husband and whispered sweet nothings. She was living the dream. And apparently, that dream didn't have room for the reality of what her best friend was going through. By the time the last song played and the sparklers were lit for the grand exit, I was exhausted. Not the good kind of wedding exhaustion where your feet hurt from dancing, but a soul-deep weariness that makes your bones feel heavy. We said our goodbyes, the I love yous and the congratulations, all of it feeling like ash in my mouth. It wasn't until we got into the car and the doors clicked shut, sealing us in the silence of the night, that the dam finally broke. My husband started talking, his voice thick with anger. I cannot believe that guy. I should have decked him. I really should have. The nerve to do that while you're helping the bride. He hit the steering wheel with the heel of his hand. He's lucky I didn't end the night in a jail cell. I looked out the window at the dark trees rushing past. He kissed me, I said. The car went silent. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the pavement. What? My husband asked, his voice dropping an octave. On the stage, I whispered, tears finally hot and fast down my cheeks. When he leaned down, when he put his head on my shoulder, he didn't just whisper to me. He kissed my neck. He kissed my shoulder. He wouldn't let go. I heard my husband's breath hitch. I could feel the temperature in the car rise as his fury reached a boiling point. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me right then? Because it was her wedding, I sobbed. I didn't want to ruin it. I didn't want you to fight him. I just wanted it to be over. We sat in that silence for a long time. My husband agreed that we'd handled it the best we could in the moment, but the realization of the full extent of the assault changed everything. It wasn't just a drunk guy being handsy. It was a deliberate, aggressive act of sexual misconduct. The next morning, the sun rose on a world that felt different. The magic of the wedding had evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hard reality. We had to drop off some items at the newlyweds' house before they left for their honeymoon. Some decorations, Sarah's earrings that her father had forgotten in the rush. I told myself that this was it. In the quiet of her living room, away from the music and the crowds, we would talk. She would apologize for freezing up. She would tell me she was horrified. She would tell me she'd talked to the groom and that Alex was being dealt with. We pulled into their driveway. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. We walked inside, and there they were, the happy couple, surrounded by half-packed suitcases and leftover cake. I handed Sarah her earrings. I took a deep breath, trying to find the words to start the conversation. I mentioned something small first, a safe opening. Hey, your dad felt so bad about forgetting these, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Sarah took the earrings, gave a tight, thin smile, and looked me dead in the eye. I only want to remember the good things from the day, she said. Her voice was as cold as ice. The message was loud and clear. Don't you dare bring it up. Don't you dare ruin my memory of my perfect day with your drama. I felt like she'd slapped me across the face. The car ride home from Sarah's house that morning was the loudest silence I've ever experienced. My husband Mark gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He didn't say a word, and neither did I. We both knew exactly what had just happened. In one sentence, I only want to remember the good things. Sarah hadn't just closed the door on a conversation. She had effectively erased my experience. She had told me in no uncertain terms that my trauma was a blemish on her aesthetic, and she wasn't interested in looking at it. As soon as we walked through our front door, I collapsed onto the sofa. I didn't even take my coat off. I just sat there, staring at the wall, feeling like I was disappearing. You know that feeling when you're shouting for help in a dream, but no sound comes out? That was my reality. She saw it, Mark, I whispered, my voice cracking. She was right there. I looked her in the eye while he was doing it. She didn't move. She didn't even stand up. Mark sat down next to me, his face a mask of controlled fury. I know. I saw her face too. She looked like she was more worried about someone noticing the scene than she was about you. It's disgusting. Alex is a predator, but Sarah is supposed to be your sister. That's the word that kept hitting me. Sister. We had been through everything together. I had been the one she called at 3 a.m. when her previous boyfriend cheated on her. I was the one who helped her navigate the messy politics of her family. I had spent months, literally months, helping her hand tie tiny lavender bundles for the wedding favors until my fingers were raw. I had invested so much of my heart into her happiness, and when I needed her to give me just a fraction of that back, she'd shut down. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Sarah tagged you in a post. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened the app, and there it was. A carousel of photos from the wedding. The first one was a professional shot of us laughing together while getting our hair done. The second was the two of us at the head table, the very table where it happened. The caption read, "The most perfect day with the most perfect people." My heart is so full, I wouldn't change a single second of it. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to drop the phone. I wouldn't change a single second of it. Not the part where your guest assaulted your best friend. Not the part where your stepbrother-in-law was a drunken menace. Not the part where you watched someone you love freeze in terror and you did nothing. I realized then that Sarah wasn't just remembering the good things. She was rewriting history. She was curating a version of her life where nothing bad ever happens. And she expected me to play my part in that fiction. She expected me to be the smiling maid of honor in the background of her perfect memories, never breathing a word about the dark shadow that had fallen over that stage. Over the next few days, the nervous system loop I mentioned earlier started to take hold. If you've never experienced it, it's hard to describe. It's like your brain is a record player with a deep scratch. I'd be doing something completely normal, brushing my teeth, making coffee, answering an email, and suddenly, I'd feel the weight of Alex's hand on my back. I'd feel the damp heat of his breath on my shoulder. I'd see Sarah's eyes, cold and distant, watching us. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back on that stage. I'd analyze every second. Why didn't I push him? Why didn't I scream? I started blaming myself, which is the cruelest part of any assault. I told myself that if I had just been stronger, if I had caused a scene, maybe she would have had to acknowledge it. But then I'd remember the drop behind me, the dark garden, the edge of the stage. I was physically trapped. I was doing the only thing my body knew how to do to survive the moment. I froze. And then came the texts. Sarah was on her honeymoon in Bali. She started sending me photos of sunsets, tropical drinks, and infinity pools. OMG, you would love it here. We have to do a girls' trip soon. The massage I got today was life-changing. Hope you're relaxing too. I'm thinking about doing a brunch for the bridesmaids when we get back to look at the professional photos. You free on the 15th? It was surreal. It was like I was being gaslighted by a smartphone. She was acting as if the wedding had been a flawless, beautiful dream. No mention of Alex, no mention of the incident, no check-in on how I was doing. She was just Sarah. Bubbly, self-absorbed, and perfectly happy. Mark saw the messages over my shoulder one evening while we were making dinner. He slammed the cutting board down. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped. "She's acting like nothing happened? She hasn't even told her husband what his brother did?" "I don't think so," I said, my voice barely a whisper. If the groom knew the full story, that Alex kissed me and grabbed me like that, there's no way he'd just be sipping cocktails in Bali right now. He's a good guy. He would have lost it. "Exactly," Mark said, pacing the kitchen. "So she's lying to him too. She's protecting the peace at your expense. She's letting that creep get away with it so she doesn't have to deal with an awkward family dinner at Christmas. It's cowardly, and it's disrespectful to us, to our marriage." Mark's anger was a mirror of my own, but it was also a burden. He felt disrespected as my husband, that another man had laid hands on his wife, and the family was brushing it off. He wanted an apology. He wanted Alex to face consequences. And honestly, he wanted Sarah to step up and be the friend she claimed to be. I spent hours in my head rehearsing the conversation I wanted to have with her. I'd imagine her coming home and us sitting down and me saying, "Sarah, I love you, but you failed me. You watched me get hurt and you did nothing. I need you to acknowledge that." But then I'd hear her voice in my head. "I only want to remember the good things." I felt like I was being told to stay in my place, to stay in the good box. If I brought it up, I was the one making it about me. I was the one ruining her honeymoon. I was the one creating drama. The social pressure to keep quiet for the sake of the bride is a powerful, suffocating thing. It's a silent contract you sign when you agree to be in a wedding party. The bride's happiness is the only thing that matters today. But the wedding was over. The cake was eaten. The flowers were dead. When does my humanity start mattering again? I started looking back at our friendship through a different lens. I thought about the times I dimmed my own light to make her shine. I thought about the times she'd been busy when I was going through a hard time, only to reappear when she had something to celebrate. Was this always who she was? Or did the Bridezilla transformation somehow fuse with her personality and leave her completely devoid of empathy? The worst part was the isolation. Because we were the core of the wedding party, I couldn't really talk to our mutual friends about it without it becoming gossip. I didn't want to be the one to start the fire. I just wanted someone to put the fire out that was burning inside of me. I felt like I was mourning, not just the loss of my sense of safety, but the loss of a person I thought I knew. Every perfect photo she posted felt like a brick in a wall she was building between us. A wall made of white lace and good vibes only. I realized that if I didn't say something, this would eat me alive. But if I did say something, I might lose my best friend forever. I was standing at a crossroads, and both paths looked like they ended in heartbreak. I looked at my phone, another text from Sarah, a picture of her and the groom, smiling in front of a waterfall. "Living our best life, miss you." I didn't reply. I couldn't. The days turned into weeks, and Sarah's honeymoon finally came to an end. But for me, the honeymoon period of our friendship was officially dead. While she was posting filtered photos of sunsets in Bali, I was sitting in a therapist's office for the first time in years, trying to explain why a wedding, a celebration of love, had left me feeling like a hollowed-out shell. My therapist called it moral injury. It wasn't just the assault itself. It was the betrayal of the witness. It was the fact that the person who was supposed to have my back had chosen to look the other way. Every time I closed my eyes, I didn't just see Alex's face. I saw Sarah's. I saw that split second where her eyes flicked to the dance floor, checking to see if anyone else was watching, before she decided to do nothing. She hadn't been checking to see if I was okay. She'd been checking to see if her perfect reputation was at risk. The internal loop I was stuck in became a physical weight. I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my heart racing, the phantom sensation of a hand on my waist making my skin itch. I found myself avoiding the rustic section of home decor stores because the smell of cedar or the sight of fairy lights triggered a low-grade panic attack. It was as if the entire aesthetic of her wedding had become a crime scene in my mind. Mark, bless him, was trying his best to be patient, but his anger was evolving. It wasn't just about Alex anymore. It was about the lack of accountability. He felt like our marriage had been insulted. We had stood up there as the best man and the maid of honor, the pillars of the wedding party, and we had been treated like disposable props. "She's coming back on Tuesday," Mark said one evening, looking at his phone. The groom texted me. They want to get dinner on Friday to catch up. Are we really going to sit there and eat pasta while Alex is probably invited to their next family Sunday roast like nothing happened? I looked at the invitation on my own screen. Sarah had sent a flurry of heart emojis and a gif of a girl dancing. "Missed you guys so much. Can't wait to tell you everything about the trip." The cognitive dissonance was staggering. How could someone be so bubbly when there was a rotting carcass of a secret sitting between us? I realized then that Sarah wasn't just avoiding the bad things. She was actively burying them, and she expected me to provide the shovel. "I can't do dinner, Mark," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I can't sit across from her and pretend. If I go to that dinner and I don't say anything, I'm betraying myself. But if I do say something at a celebratory we're back dinner, I'm the villain. I'm the one bringing everyone down." "So what's the alternative?" Mark asked. "We just fade away? We've been friends for a decade. You were the sister she never had. Are you really just going to let it end like this?" I didn't have an answer. I spent the next few days in a state of paralysis. I drafted 10 different texts to her, ranging from gentle to accusatory. "Hey Sarah, can we talk about what happened with Alex? It's really been bothering me." Too soft. She'd brush it off. "I need an apology for what happened at the wedding. I'm hurt that you didn't check on me." Too blunt. She'd get defensive. "I can't see you right now. I need space." The coward's way out, but tempting. I eventually settled on silence. I didn't reply to the dinner invite. I didn't comment on her back home posts. I just stopped. But Sarah isn't the kind of person who handles silence well. To her, silence is a vacuum that needs to be filled with her own narrative. When Friday arrived and I still hadn't confirmed for dinner, the calls started. I watched my phone vibrate on the coffee table, her smiling face popping up on the caller ID. I felt a surge of genuine fear. My best friend, the person I used to call for comfort, was now the primary source of my anxiety. Finally, she sent a long, rambling voice note. "Hey babe, I haven't heard from you and I'm getting a bit worried. Is everything okay? I know things were a little weird at the end of the night with the whole Alex thing, but honestly, he was just so drunk and I think everyone was just stressed. I really want to just put all that behind us and celebrate. I have a gift for you from Bali that I'm dying to give you. Call me." There it was, the Alex thing. She'd finally acknowledged it, but in the most dismissive way possible. It was weird. He was drunk. We were stressed. She had effectively turned a sexual assault into a stressful misunderstanding. And the mention of a gift? It felt like a bribe. A small wooden souvenir to buy my silence. I played the voice note for Mark. He didn't even finish listening to it before he walked out of the room to cool off. When he came back, he sat down and looked me in the eye. "You have to tell her," he said. "Not for her sake, for yours. If you don't speak your truth, this loop you're in is never going to stop. You're waiting for her to give you permission to be hurt, but she's never going to give it to you because it makes her look bad. You have to take that permission for yourself." He was right. I was waiting for a safe moment to be a victim. I was waiting for Sarah to create a space where I could say, "I am hurting," and have her respond with, "I see you." But Sarah was the one who had built the walls in the first place. She wasn't going to tear them down. I decided I wouldn't do dinner. I wouldn't do a quote-unquote group hangout where the social pressure to be polite would gag me. I messaged her back, my fingers trembling. "I'm not ready for a big dinner yet. Can you come over to my place on Sunday morning? Just us? I think we need to have a real conversation about the wedding." The reply was almost instant. "Of course, Sunday is perfect. Can't wait to see you. Love you." The hearts felt like a mockery. She still didn't get it. She thought a real conversation meant we were going to gossip about the bridesmaids or complain about the caterer. She thought we were going to clear the air so we could go back to being the perfect duo. Saturday was the longest day of my life. I felt like a soldier prepping for a battle I knew I was going to lose. I wrote down what I wanted to say. I practiced it in the mirror. I told myself that I deserved to be heard, regardless of how she reacted. I told myself that a friendship that couldn't survive the truth wasn't a friendship worth saving. But as the sun set on Saturday night, a new thought crept in. What if I was wrong? What if I was making a big deal out of nothing? What if Alex really did just trip and his hand accidentally landed there? What if the kiss was just a clumsy, drunken stumble? I looked at the photos again. Not the ones Sarah posted, but the ones Mark had taken on his phone. There was one shot, taken from the side, right as Alex was leaning over me. You couldn't see the kiss, but you could see my face. You could see the way my shoulders were hiked up to my ears. You could see the sheer, cold terror in my eyes. I wasn't making it up. My body didn't lie. Sunday morning arrived, gray and overcast. I sat at my kitchen table with 2 mugs of coffee, waiting for the sound of her car in the driveway. Mark had gone to his parents' house to give us space, but he left his phone on, telling me to call him the second she left. When the doorbell finally rang, it felt like a jump scare in a horror movie. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my sweater, and opened the door. There she was, Sarah, looking tan, radiant, and carrying a small gift bag wrapped in tropical paper. She beamed at me and moved in for a hug. And for the first time in 10 years, I flinched. The flinch was instinctive. It wasn't something I planned, but the moment she reached for me, my muscles locked tight. It was like my body recognized her not as my best friend, but as a bystander who had watched me drown and decided not to get her shoes wet. Sarah's arms stayed frozen in midair for a heartbeat, her smile faltering just enough to show a flicker of annoyance before she masked it with a look of concern. "Oh wow, you really are jumpy, aren't you?" she said, her voice light as if she were talking to a skittish animal. She stepped past me into the house, dropping the colorful gift bag onto my entry table. "I guess the post-wedding blues are hitting you harder than I thought." I closed the door, the click of the latch sounding like a gavel. "It's not post-wedding blues, Sarah. Can we sit down?" We moved to the kitchen. I pushed a mug of coffee toward her, but she didn't touch it. She sat on the edge of the chair, looking around my kitchen as if she'd never been there before, despite having spent 100 Saturday mornings at this very table. She looked so polished. Her skin was glowing from the Bali sun, her hair was perfectly highlighted, and she was wearing a brand new sundress. She looked like a woman who didn't have a single care in the world. I, on the other hand, felt like I was wearing my trauma like a heavy, leaden coat. "So," she started, picking at a loose thread on the placemat, "I got your message. You said you wanted to have a real conversation, which sounds very serious and, honestly, a little bit scary. Is everything okay with you and Mark?" The way she immediately tried to deflect the focus onto my marriage was a classic Sarah move. If there was a problem, it had to be somewhere else. It couldn't possibly be here, between us. "Mark and I are fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We're actually stronger than ever, because we've been talking through everything that happened at the wedding. But Sarah, you and I haven't talked about it. Not really. And I can't move past it until we do." Sarah's face went through a rapid-fire series of expressions. Confusion, realization, and then a hard, defensive flatness. She leaned back and crossed her arms. "I thought we covered this at my house when you dropped off the earrings. I told you, I really just want to focus on the positive. It was my wedding day, babe. It was supposed to be the best day of my life. Why would I want to dwell on Alex being a drunken idiot?" "Because that drunken idiot assaulted me," I said, the words sharp and clear. "He didn't just trip, Sarah. He pinned me down. He put his hand on my body in a way that was sexual and aggressive. And then he kissed me. He kissed my neck and my shoulder while I was trapped between the table and the edge of the stage. And I looked at you. I looked you right in the eye, and I was terrified." Sarah's eyes flicked away, staring at the coffee machine. "I saw him being clingy," she admitted, her voice dropping a few decibels. "And I said his name. I told him to stop. I did say something, didn't I? I called him out." "You said his name," I countered, like he was a kid who'd spilled juice. "You didn't move. You didn't help me up. You didn't even check if I was okay after Mark pulled him off me. You just sat there and watched." "What was I supposed to do?" she snapped, her voice rising. "Jump up and start a fistfight with my new husband's stepbrother in the middle of our reception? Do you have any idea how much pressure I was under? I had 70 people watching me. I had photographers. I had my parents there. I was trying to keep the peace. I was trying to make sure the night didn't turn into a disaster." My safety was a disaster to be avoided? I felt a hot flash of anger surge through my chest. "You were more worried about the optics of the wedding than you were about the fact that your best friend was being groped 3 feet away from you?" That's not fair. Sarah stood up, her chair screeching against the tile. You're making me out to be some kind of monster. I was in shock too. It all happened so fast. And then Mark handled it and it was over. I thought we could just move on. I didn't think you'd still be obsessing over it weeks later. You're making my entire wedding memory about this. I'm not making it about this, Sarah. It is about this for me. I can't look at the photos without feeling sick. I can't sleep because I keep replaying the moment I realized you weren't going to help me. That's the part that hurts the most. Not Alex. I expect creeps to be creeps. But I didn't expect my best friend to value a perfect day over my physical autonomy. Sarah started pacing the kitchen, her heels clicking rhythmically. This was the moment I realized we were living in two different realities. In her reality, she was the victim of a ruined vibe. In mine, I was the victim of an assault and a profound betrayal. Does the groom even know? I asked quietly. She stopped pacing and looked at me, her eyes wide. What? Does your husband know that his stepbrother sexually assaulted his best man's wife at his wedding? Does he know the full extent of what happened? The grab? The kiss? Sarah's face went pale. I told him Alex was being inappropriate and that he needed to be cut off. I told him there was a bit of a scuffle on the stage. So you lied by omission, I said. You downplayed it to protect Alex? Or to protect yourself? To protect the family, she hissed. Alex's mother is already a nightmare. If I tell my husband that Alex did what you're saying he did, it would cause a rift that would never heal. It would ruin his relationship with his brother. It would make every holiday a war zone. Do you really want to be responsible for tearing a family apart? The audacity of that question left me breathless. She was pathologizing my trauma, turning my need for the truth into an act of aggression against her new family. I'm not the one tearing a family apart, Sarah. Alex did that when he decided to put his hands on me. And you're the one making it worse by covering it up. You're asking me to carry this secret for you so you can have nice Christmas dinners? You're asking me to sacrifice my mental health so you don't have to deal with an awkward conversation. Sarah sat back down, but she didn't look at me. She looked defeated, but not the kind of defeated where someone realizes they're wrong. It was the kind of defeated where they realize they're not going to get their way. I just don't know what you want from me, she whispered. Do you want me to divorce him? Do you want me to go back in time and change it? I can't change it. I wanted an apology, I said. A real one. I wanted you to say, I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I prioritized the wedding over you. And I wanted you to tell your husband the truth so that Alex is never allowed to be near me again. Mark is furious, Sarah. He feels like Alex got away with it. And he's right. Alex did get away with it because you're shielding him. Sarah was silent for a long time. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. When she finally looked up, her eyes were cold. The best friend mask was gone, replaced by something sharp and defensive. I think you're being incredibly selfish, she said, her voice trembling with a different kind of anger. You were my maid of honor. Your job was to support me. And instead, you're trying to make me feel guilty for the one day of my life that was supposed to be about me? If you were really my friend, you'd let this go. You'd see that I'm happy, and you'd be happy for me, instead of digging up something that can't be fixed. I felt something inside me finally snap. It wasn't a loud break. It was a quiet, clean severance, like a thread being snipped. I realized in that moment that the Sarah I had loved for 10 years didn't exist anymore. Or maybe she never had. The person sitting across from me was someone who would always choose her own comfort over the truth. I think you should go, I said. Sarah blinked, surprised. What? We're not done talking. Yes, we are, I said, standing up. I invited you here to see if there was a way to save this friendship. I wanted to see if you even cared about what happened to me. But you've made it clear that you only care about how my trauma affects your good things. I can't be friends with someone who views my safety as an inconvenience. Sarah stood up, her face turning a blotchy red. Fine. If you want to throw away 10 years over a drunk guy being handsy for 30 seconds, that's on you. But don't you dare go telling people I didn't care. I did my best. She grabbed the Bali gift bag from the entry table and shoved it toward me. Here, take your stupid gift. I hope it was worth it. She didn't wait for me to take it. She dropped it on the floor and walked out, slamming the front door so hard the glass rattled in the frame. I stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the colorful bag on the floor. I felt a strange mixture of devastating grief and incredible lightness. The loop in my head didn't stop, but the static was starting to clear. But as I watched her car speed away through the window, I realized the nightmare wasn't over. Sarah wasn't going to go quietly. She was a woman who lived for her narrative, and I had just become the villain in her story. I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that the fallout from this was only just beginning. When the sound of Sarah's tires finally faded into the distance, the house felt unnervingly quiet. I looked down at the gift bag she'd dropped, a bright, tropical patterned thing that looked so cheerful and out of place on my floor. I didn't open it. I couldn't. To me, that bag wasn't a gift. It was a bribe for my silence, a souvenir from a trip funded by the same perfect life that required my trauma to be buried. Mark came home about 20 minutes later. He didn't even have to ask how it went. He saw the look on my face, saw the gift bag on the floor, and just pulled me into his arms. I cried then, not the frantic, terrified tears of the wedding night, but a slow, mourning kind of sob. I was grieving the person I thought Sarah was. I was grieving the decade of memories that now felt tainted, like a beautiful photograph that you suddenly realize was taken in a graveyard. "She's not going to stop, Mark," I whispered into his chest. "She's going to make me the villain." And I was right. Within hours, the digital walls began to close in. It started with a notification. Sarah has unfriended you. Then, Sarah has blocked you. Then came the messages from our mutual friends. Not many, but enough to know the narrative had already been set in motion. "Hey, I heard about the blow-up," one friend texted. "Sarah's pretty devastated. She says you're going through some stuff and taking it out on her. Are you okay?" Another message was blunter. "I know the wedding was stressful, but don't you think you're being a bit hard on her? It was her big day." It was masterful, in a sick kind of way. Sarah wasn't telling people I was a liar. She was telling them I was unstable. She was framing my pain as a mental health crisis that she, the long-suffering best friend, was trying to navigate with grace. She was gaslighting me through the grapevine, ensuring that if I ever did tell the full story, it would be viewed through the lens of my breakdown. But the real explosion happened between the men. Mark's phone rang that evening. It was the groom. They had been best friends since college, the kind of bond that usually survives anything. But as I sat on the stairs, listening to Mark's side of the conversation, I knew this was the end of that, too. "No, man, she's not stressed," Mark said, his voice low and vibrating with a suppressed rage. "She's hurt. And she's hurt because your wife watched a man put his hands on mine and did absolutely nothing. In fact, she's still doing nothing. She's lying to you, bro." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the muffled, frantic sound of the groom's voice. "You think I'm making it up?" Mark snapped. "Ask the bartender. Ask the other bridesmaid. Better yet, look at the photos. Look at the one I took on the stage. Look at her face and tell me she's stressed." The call ended abruptly. Mark sat down on the bottom step and put his head in his hands. He had just lost his best friend to protect me. The weight of that sacrifice felt immense. I realized then that the perfect wedding had claimed more than just my peace of mind. It had razed our entire social circle to the ground. A few days later, I received an email. Not a text, not a call, but a formal, cold email from the groom. He told me that he had spoken to Sarah and to Alex. He said that Alex admitted to being clumsy, but denied any intentional touching or kissing. He said that Sarah was traumatized by my accusations, and that for the sake of his marriage and his family's peace, he was asking us not to contact them again. He ended it by saying he was disappointed in Mark for letting a misunderstanding destroy a brotherhood. That was the final twist of the knife. They had formed a united front, the bride, the groom, and the predator, all huddled together under the umbrella of family peace, leaving me out in the rain. I'm in therapy now. It's helping, slowly. My therapist tells me that my reaction wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. It was the moment I stopped accepting breadcrumbs of respect and demanded the whole loaf. She says that Sarah's reaction is a common defense mechanism for people who prioritize their own comfort over justice. If she acknowledged what happened to me, she'd have to acknowledge her own failure as a friend, and her ego simply isn't strong enough to handle that. As for Alex, I haven't seen him since. I don't know if he'll ever face real consequences. In the eyes of that family, he's just a guy who drinks too much. But I know the truth. My husband knows the truth. And deep down, in the quiet moments when the camera isn't clicking and the champagne isn't flowing, Sarah knows the truth too. She might have her perfect wedding photos, but she lost the one person who would have done anything for her. She traded a lifelong friendship for a comfortable lie. And as I move forward, I'm realizing that's a trade I'm glad I didn't make. I'm sharing this because I know there are others out there who have been told to keep the peace at the expense of their own soul. I want to know, have you ever been in a situation where your safety was treated like an inconvenience? Have you ever had a friend show their true colors in a moment of crisis? How do you handle it when the person who's supposed to protect you is the one who lets you down? Let me know in the comments. Your stories help me feel a little less alone in this. And if you've been through something similar, please don't stay silent for the sake of someone else's perfect day. Your reality matters more than their aesthetic. If you want to hear more stories about standing up for the truth, even when it's hard, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. It means a lot to have you here. I still have that Bali gift bag. It's sitting in the back of my closet, unopened. Sometimes I think about throwing it away, but for now, I keep it there. It's a reminder that even the most beautiful packaging can hide something hollow. I'm building a new life now, one where the people around me don't just want to remember the good things, but are brave enough to stand by me through the bad ones too.